So hi everyone. Today we're going to do an episode about England's World Cup team and the US World Cup team because my guest is someone who is a known asset in the podcasting community, especially around Liverpool FC. And with that, I bring on Avi. So hi Avi, welcome to this show.
Nice how's it going? Yeah, no, pleasure to be here, man. Pleasure to be here, and always supportive of anyone that wants to start a podcast and talk about football or soccer, as some people like to call it out here. I'm always supportive. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so welcome. So we'll jump straight into England's chances and England's setup for the World Cup. So as we know, England are always kind of, the expectation is always a title favorite, but the reality always kind of sometimes falls off of that. One of the things I've noticed about this World Cup and a few folks I've been speaking to, I don't really see a clear-cut favorite in terms of in the past where there was one team that was stacked from back to front. You know, this World Cup seems to be every team has strengths and every team has weaknesses. Mm-hmm. Actually, very similar to what we've seen like domestic football. You don't really see a true brilliant team unless like you're talking about PSG. So with that, with England, what do you think about the England team in terms of its setup, the players, and its chances for this upcoming World Cup?
Yeah, look, if we go back to, if we go from the manager, Thomas Tuchel, he's known to be a knockout specialist. You know, we've seen him win the best of the best. You know, he almost took that PSG team which had Neymar in it, Mbappe in it, but, you know, they narrowly lost out to Bayern Munich in that COVID final, who were terrific. But he's got into a couple of cup finals against us in 2022, FA Cup, the League Cup, you know, narrowly missed out on penalties again in both of those. Then he takes that Chelsea team to the final. I think when Lampard got sacked, he takes over in February and he beats Manchester City. So Thomas Tuchel is known to be a very good cup competition manager. I think he's got the credentials and he's not been afraid to drop the big guns, or he's not in favorable of what the public want. You know, Phil Foden isn't going to the England camp. The likes of Cole Palmer hasn't gone, you know, considering the player that Cole Palmer is on his day. He's a terrific talent. Thomas Tuchel has purely picked, you know, Trent Alexander-Arnold, who hasn't even gone because he's had a bad season at Real Madrid, but we know the quality that he possesses. But he's gone on players who have been playing for their teams and have played consistently for the teams. I know there may be one or two players like the likes of John Stones, who's been injured and in and out of that Man City team, but has travelled. But I think that's one weakness where England have lacked in that centre-back options. You know, I can go back 15, 20 years. We used to have an abundance of central defenders, but now it's very short and far between. You know, I look at Mark Gay, who's a good defender. I don't think he's world-class, but he's a very good, accomplished defender. I look at Ezri Konsa, who's good. John Stones, who's, again, on his day, he's a superb defender. And then Joel Konsa, who's had a full season at Bayer Leverkusen. I thought he deserved a call-up as well. I thought he looked good against Arsenal in the Champions League when he was playing for Bayer Leverkusen. So I do rate England's chances. I do have obviously a soft spot, having been living in England for the majority of my life, but I still think we're a tad short. I get it's coming home after the quarterfinal stages. People get overexcited, but I still think there's quality in other teams that I think that England will fall short yet again. I think a semi-final is definitely doable, and I think they should hold their head up high if they get to the semi-final. Anything less would be a disappointment. But this team is certainly equipped to get to the Final Four.
So one thing I do find is that most of the teams, when I look at most of the teams, they all kind of have deficiencies. When I looked at, like, for example, France is kind of seen as a favorite. Their attacking lineup is just like absolutely insane. But then when you look at the defense and you look at the midfield, then you kind of start saying, well, you know, I don't see these being, you know, the best of the best, you know, not like the previous French teams. And when you go to Spain and you look at the Spain squad and you're like, there's areas there where you like maybe have concerns. And then you look at, you know, the German squad, you'll see like, you know, they may have a lot of youth, but again, there's not that season or experience there. So right now, when we look at the entire landscape, I do feel like this is one of the World Cups where any team who's kind of seen as a favorite has a good chance. And at the same time, they could be a dark horse coming from out of nowhere. Because I think one of the factors that I find very interesting about this World Cup is the weather. Because in previous World Cups recently, we had South Africa, that was in the winter, 2010. The Brazil World Cup, obviously they have different climates, but there were some climates which are more favorably cooler. And this World Cup would be similar, but any games that's taking place in Miami, Texas, California right now, just so far is in indoor kind of so that will have more temperature controlled, as well as Dallas. But the overall temperature, I think, is going to have an impact for a lot of the players. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, England have kind of always struggled with heat. That's typically sort of known, seeing as though the weather in England hasn't been great. I think the climate obviously suits the South American teams. I think it suits Spain. Funnily enough, I think Spain are the most balanced. If I look at Spain's first 11, I think they will have the most balanced team. Yes, people will allude to not having a number 9, but I think they will be good with the climate. But I'm looking at those South American teams. I'm looking at Ancelotti's Brazil. If anyone can get a tune out of this average Brazil team, even though they still got talented players, but they haven't achieved anything in the last sort of 10 years in either the Copa America or the World Cup, you would presume a manager like Ancelotti and his ilk and his history and his heritage in big game competitions, big cup competitions, you would feel that he can get a tune out of Brazil. Argentina are always going to be there in the chance. I think Scaloni is a brilliant manager. 2 Copa Americas under his name, a World Cup under his name. He will feel that they can go again. And then you've got obviously the teams like Uruguay, Paraguay, South American teams who should do well. They've got the climate, they're used to the conditions. And it's the latter stages of this competition where it really tells, it really sort of masks from the teams that are not used to the weather than the ones that are.
So what do you think about the African teams? Because I know you said South America, that I believe that they're going to be prepped for the weather, definitely. And if we look at the friendlies, they've all been performing really well. And obviously coming off the back of an AFCON, a lot of the teams are more tournament ready, right? Because they only had that 6 months ago. Yep. So the team like Senegal, Morocco, they're all kind of been as a tight unit. So there's a less of a ramp up time. What do you think of your thoughts on the African teams?
I've been excited for Morocco for the last sort of year and a half. I think they've got some superb players who might not be doing well at club level, but as soon as they put on that shirt, the passion, the heart that they bring to the table, the sheer just quality. You look at someone like Hakimi, you've got playmakers, Onahi for Morocco. As the tournament goes longer, they'll have a good chance. And they were unlucky. If we think about it, in the last World Cup, they were very, very unlucky, and they've had a good AFCON, although the final was a bit, it was a disputed final. The less said, the better about the final. Right? Yeah. The less said, the better about that final. But Brahim Diaz, who's a Spanish lad, but obviously he's got Moroccan heritage. He's playing for them. So, we've been waiting a long, long time for an African nation to really do really well. I think Ghana did really well in 2010 in Africa, but it's been a long time since, Roger Mia's, you might have not been old enough, Rio, but Roger Mia's Cameroon in 1990, it's been a long time, and we need an African team to do well. We do. We need them to do well in the World Cups, and hopefully one of them can be a surprise package. Senegal in 2002 World Cup, Korea, Japan, they were brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. The first game of that tournament when they beat France 1-0, Papa Bouba Diop scoring. So it's time for an African nation to rise up. I feel it'll be Morocco, though. Morocco are a team that can get to a semi, and I'm looking forward. It's a fascinating game. I think the group stage games, there are a lot of weak games, but I think this Saturday, the Morocco-Brazil game, that'll be a good indicator to tell us where Morocco and some of these African nations will be.
Yeah, I was speaking to a fan from Brazil yesterday, and they were telling me about the Brazilian setup and the Brazilian structure, and what happened with Ancelotti, his expectations, and generally the divide in Brazil. Because overall, Brazil, this is the first time they've had a foreign coach, and it's Ancelotti. And what I was told is that they actually approached Ancelotti at the end of the Qatar World Cup. At the end of 2022, they approached him, and they were expecting to get him early on, and he basically renewed for Real Madrid for a year, and that kind of put their plans into disarray. And so they're looking at Morocco as a real acid test between, that's going to tell them where they're going to be in the tournament. They have high hopes, but that Morocco is a strong test. And when I look at Morocco as well, what makes their makeup so strong is a lot of the players are basically playing in France in the French league. And with the French squad being so stacked, a lot of them are beginning to like, well, I'll go and play for Morocco. And you know, we're seeing that, like the Bouradi, Ayoubi going to Morocco, opting to play for Morocco, and that kind of shows that once you have the youth generation coming in, and they have, like you said, a stacked youth team, they start playing and building up that squad. And then even when I look at the Ivory Coast game versus France, they were really good in terms of their physicality.
Yeah.
And I think one of the big differences is with the modern game, it's vertical, strong, physical, kind of like the Premier League. I think the Premier League is like the prototype for what world football is kind of heading to. And I think that that's going to kind of drive that that direction. So going back to England, what do you think of the players that have been selected? I know you mentioned the ones who weren't selected, but what do you think about the ones like, for example, Jude getting in? Because he didn't have the consistent year. And what do you think about, obviously Harry Kane? Everyone's kind of looking at him. I think he's one of the most overlooked players. So what's your views on that?
I think Harry Kane's he's definitely world class. I think Harry Kane is elite. I really do. The numbers that he's stacked up, and we're not talking about the German league either, but the numbers that he's stacked up in the last 8-9 years. If Mohamed Salah is elite, and we know that he is, Harry Kane is up there. And Harry Kane now is reaping the rewards where his goals are turning into trophies as well. He's won 2 Bundesliga. I thought they were unlucky against PSG. I thought they were brilliant and just narrowly missed out of being into that final against Arsenal. And this is his last swan song. You could say this is his last tournament for England. I don't think there's another World Cup in him, or maybe another Euros, but at 32, 33, I think this is his last chance. And Harry Kane has come up a little bit short when it comes to big games in the World Cup. I know he's had his hat tricks against Panama in previous World Cups, but he hasn't really gone on a sustained run. He hasn't been like the pick of the England players at a tournament. So I think it's time that Harry Kane has a big tournament. And Jude Bellingham, look, the hype. I know he's been in and out the Real Madrid team this season through injuries and various issues, but he's a world-class player. And if Thomas Tuchel gives him the freedom, and he's backed up by a good midfield like Declan Rice maybe, and Elliot Anderson as the 2 pivots, and they let Jude Bellingham run riot, he could be the player of the tournament. I really do feel that, because Jude Bellingham has everything in his locker. There's a reason that he plays for Real Madrid. There's a reason that he won that European Cup. He did the domestic treble for Real Madrid in his debut season. And last season, his numbers were still good when he was playing, but maybe this World Cup is it's gonna awaken him, and hopefully that he can make a big impact at the World Cup. But I'm excited by this England team. I think Declan Rice will have enough in the tank to play a big part in this World Cup. I'm excited by Elliot Anderson, who's the talk of the town, whether he's going to go to Manchester United or Manchester City. And I look at the wingers. Saka will need a good tournament. And Marcus Rashford, he's put up decent numbers at Barcelona. He's won the Copa, the La Liga Spain. So he'll be having confidence, and he's come back into the fray. So I believe he will have a good tournament as well. I think England as a team, the first 11, they're good. And Tuchel will get a tune out of these boys. He'll definitely get a tune out of them.
My concern has been England's been ever in tournament games, like in the qualifiers and stuff, they've been good. And then in the friendlies in the last 6 months, once they've qualified, the performances have not been the best. And maybe it's players who are trying to make get to the World Cup didn't step up. But overall, I've been kind of underwhelmed. And even the game we played this weekend, I didn't watch the full game, but Rio got man of the match. And for me, when I watched the compilation, I don't see what man of the match performance was there, because there was a lot of dribbling, but a lot of going backwards and some random crosses, and really not enough end product for me. And this is it sounds like a harsh criticism or something for a 17-year-old. But for me, is when I look at hype and when I look at players, I always kind of look at like, what is their intention for what they're doing, right? Mm-hmm. When they get on the ball, are they looking at, like, I just want to beat the man, okay, that's great for the first step, but you have to have the football IQ is what's the next step after that. And right now, I'm not seeing that. And for me, when I was watching Rio play for Liverpool this season, I was like, yes, he's got a quicker dribble. Yes, he's got a better speed in terms of getting a past a player. But the performances, if you look at it, they were very Gakpo-like in terms of they're all cutting in onto the right foot and taking a shot or recycling the ball. So that's where when he played on the right wing, I was like, okay, maybe let's see for England if he's going to get a cross in or a chance. But the fact that that didn't happen, and there was one part where he got the ball on the right wing and there was a cutback open, and instead he took an extra touch and lost that. So obviously he's not the World Cup, but for me, when it comes to wingers right now, which seems to be everybody wants one, especially like Liverpool. And then when I was speaking about Brazil, is Brazil's converting all their 10s into wingers. So which was interesting was that Brazil no longer is manufacturing 10s even in their domestic league, and they're importing them. And then the guy told me yesterday they imported Jesse Lingard to play, like Memphis Depay. So this is, if you look at that in world football, the fact that Brazil no longer has a Rivaldo, no longer has a Pele, and all the other greats that they have, and its wingers. When I look at the England wingers, I'm kind of looking like if Saka doesn't have a good game, what's the backup? What's the squad depth? And for me, there's a huge fall off there. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the fall off is Noni Madueke. I think every team should always take a wild card pick. I remember in 2006, Sven-Göran Eriksson, God bless him, took Theo Walcott, and we all thought Theo Walcott, 16 years old, coming from Southampton, he had joined Arsenal that summer, but he hadn't had any minutes. I was wondering, is that the right call? But maybe he'll bring him on. He didn't bring him on. And England could have done with a decent striker because I don't think Jermaine Defoe travelled in 2006. We've seen Michael Owen at 98, Glenn Hoddle, took him to the World Cup. And we saw everything that he did, the goal against Romania, then follows it up against Argentina, with that wonder goal. I thought Rio would have been, and there are youngsters in the Premier League, but I thought Rio would have been that wild card that Tuchel would have said, you know what, I'm going to take him to the plane I'm going to take him on the plane to the US. And, he hasn't gone. He has gone to the traveling squad. He did play against New Zealand. I didn't catch much of the game, but I heard that he got man of the match. And for me, friendlies are kind of meaningless. It is more for match fitness, climatizing to the weather, and then first game of the tournament against Croatia. It's going to be a tough game for England, but hopefully they'll get through it. But in terms of Rio, yeah, I thought it should have gone because after Saka, Rashford, it's sort of thin. It's like threadbare, isn't it? I think you've got Madueke, who is an okay player. I don't think he's anything great. I thought the money that Arsenal paid was way over the top. Eze could do a job maybe off the left if that's into Tuchel's thinking. But yeah, they are a little bit short when it comes to wingers. I think in general, in world football, away from Spain, who've got Yamal and a Nico Williams who's been injured as well, there's very few and far between of top teams. I look at France, Akaluche, Elise, but they're sort of inward wingers. They're like crossbreeds between a 10 and a left winger. So there is that as well. But hopefully, Tuchel has a plan.
So that was interesting because when you look at the drop off there and you look at the players that were left behind, and then it'll make you wonder, like, okay, so if not to be any Arsenal here, but if Eze and Madueke made it, I believe they only went in there because of the title win pedigree, that they were part of that mindset of winning a title and making a deep run into the Champions League. But when we look at the other likes like Palmer, Foden, Gibbs White, and those other players, I feel that they could have been a better option as a squad depth than because when you need the game changing in a cup game, you need someone that's the players and look back like, okay, we got some backup here. But when I look at the players that are on the bench that's coming on, I don't see anybody that the team are going to be like, okay, he's going to help us get a goal here. It's kind of like we just added a player to kind of close out a game. So the squad depth looks like players to close out games rather than help win games, which goes against that, mindset of being a knockout expert. On the winger topic which is very interesting, is that, like I said, when I was talking to the guy from Brazil, is like Brazil's focusing on wingers. And if you look at Martinelli, Rafinha, Ryan, Endrick, all of them are versatile play along the front line.
Yeah.
None of them are kind of that 10, which is interesting because I don't think any of them are really the cut-in type, right? Even Rodrigo, maybe Rodrigo's the one who cut-in type. What's your views on in that winger perspective? Do you see the trend going to be heading more towards the floating 10 cutting type of a winger, or we're going to go back to blistering pace on the outside? Because right now I think we're kind of in between.
I think we are in between. I think we're seeing more of these hybrids between 10s, 10 and then off playing in like an inward winger. Anthony Gordon, you could say, who's gone to the England team. I think he could be a secret weapon. I think he's key to England's chances. I know apparently he didn't have a great game against New Zealand, but he's one that I would keep an eye on because he can get in behind. He does hold width. He can be a man with pace, and yeah, he's super quick. In terms of like the modern game, I don't think we'll see out and out wingers. Salah was an inward winger. Sadio Mane was an inward winger. Yes, they can go out with Salah, not so much, but Mane could go out on the outside. But it's very rare now. Very rare do we see like the old-fashioned type. Madueke, I could say off that right, likes to hold width, but again, he'll cut in because he's left-footed.
Yeah. So what's your chances that you mentioned semi-final for England? So is that your final prediction for?
Yeah, I think England, if they can get to the semis, they have got a good team. I look at that midfield, Elliot Anderson, Jude, Eze, Morgan Rogers, Kobbie Mainoo, Declan Rice, Jordan Henderson as as the support system for that midfield, as he's the leader. I think they've got the talent in midfield. Forward is where when they need some trickery, whether Kane, Gordon, and Saka can provide that. Let's see.
Okay, with that, we'll pivot on to the US because we both live in the United States and it's very close. And actually, the US Team USA training facility on a good day can probably see where they're training from.
Nice.
And this morning they actually had open training practice. That was the first and only time, but it was a lottery ticket to get in, so we were kind of see that. Tell us something. Well, first, before we get into that, for many folks, they may not know that that DC is the capital of the US. It's not in Los Angeles. We're both on the West Coast. So for folks who don't know, the US has 3 time zones, and that is going to have an impact on the World Cup games, and that will kind of makes things a bit easier because the games that start on the East Coast in New York at 3 p.m., they can start a game at 3 p.m. on the West Coast, and it's 6 p.m. on the East Coast. So local time, check that. So with that, as we get into Team USA, let us, what are your thoughts on the team and the players picked, and your overall thought of the Team USA?
Yeah, I think Pochettino is a great coach. He's a good manager. He's a good man. He's been great with youngsters. He's got a true track proven record ever since Southampton, Spurs, of working well with youngsters. I won't talk about his Chelsea stint so much because that club is just in disarray, unfortunately. But he's taken a team which he's tried to pick players who are playing again for the clubs, whether they were playing in MLS or whether they were playing in Europe. But it solely lies on Captain America, isn't it, Christian Pulisic? He's going to be the linchpin in this team, and then he'll have able runners, able support systems like the Weston McKennie, who's been playing all over Europe. He's like been like a mainstay for Juventus. Tyler Adams, who plays for Bournemouth. Gio Reyna, who came with this huge expectation of the next golden boy. He's really got to get going sooner rather than later. And then Florian Balogun, I think he's at Monaco. He scored a fair few goals. And Timothy Weah, who obviously Weah, that name, it's just always had this sort of star celebrity name because of I believe it's his uncle or is it his dad, isn't it? George Weah.
It's his dad.
His dad, George Weah, who was, who was a legend of the game. So they're a good team, but I think again we're looking at quarterfinals for the US team. I don't think they've got that one star. I saw them against Germany. They were okay. They were good in patches, not so great. The goals conceded weren't great, but yeah, USA is a country that I would be looking at in 10 years' time. In two World
Yeah,
Cups time, I think they will have the youngsters, they will have players, because the sooner that they give these youngsters the chance to go to Europe and learn the European game, staying in the MLS does them no favor, because it is a weak league. It's not great. Messi's still scoring like 30, 40 goals a season in the MLS at the age of 38, 39. These youngsters who are up and coming in these academies, they really need to be going to Europe. I look at Kevin Sullivan, who's going to City, I believe, this year. I think that deal was done 2 years ago, but he's had to stay in MLS. He'll be a revelation if he, starts learning that Manchester City way and the academy life of there, and for the development.
I think with the US is actually very interesting. Is that what was it 34, 32 years ago, World Cup 94?
Yeah,
There was that was kind of the start of the MLS, and with that there was kind of talk that because before there was I guess you call it the US Super League, where Pele, I think Maradona was playing, and
yeah.
it didn't go anywhere. I think it lasted a year. MLS died after World Cup '94, and since then it's definitely not the top sport here. The top sport obviously being American football, and then basketball, hockey, baseball. They're kind of all about that. But one of the things that has been happening over that 30 years is that there's been far more players kind of getting into Europe. As you mentioned, Tyler Adams, Balogun, but actually Balogun's born in London, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of them playing overseas. However, I still don't see it, even though there's far more popular presence and culture, like people play NBA players like Josh Hart's a Chelsea fan. It still doesn't seem to be taking off. But I think this World Cup, being that social media age, we're going to see kind of a level of fandom that wasn't there 30 years ago. So 30 years ago, it was on TV only. Now it's going to be all over social media, and players are going to kind of see the hype of Cristiano Ronaldo, or hype of Messi when it comes to the international phase, because it's completely different from what MLS. One thing about the MLS, I do think it holds back the development of the players in the US because of the infrastructure, right? Because as you mentioned, uh, it's not like club football. And do you want to kind of explain that, just so that for the audience, about the difference between the MLS teams and the structure versus what we have in Europe?
Yeah, I think it's to do with the scouting, isn't it? Like it's always been where these privately, I don't want to discriminate here, but the privately educated sort of kids get more of a chance to go in this MLS rather than the street footballers. I think that's the better way of saying it, where these street footballers have got the natural talent, the hunger, the passion, and they should be integrated into the MLS. They're not given the chances because of fees, school. These soccer academies, they're expensive. Let's
Hmm.
face it, they're really expensive. So the families with not enough money, they can't send their kids to these classes. So what happens is these academies are more for the middle class, the rich. So we're seeing them come in, but do they have the same hunger? Do they have the same passion as some of the kids who are fighting some of these street footballers, playing in day in, day out with a pair of socks, or, broken footballs, they haven't got the Nike footballs from, sporting goods or anything like that. They're playing with what they can make do with. So there's a disparity there. Until that doesn't come together, we're gonna see that. But we are seeing more and more youngsters now making an impact in the MLS game, and we're seeing more and more youngsters now being scouted by Europe's finest clubs. There's a few youngsters who are out in Germany. There's a few youngsters out in the Premier League. So I'm hoping not 2026, not 2030, by 2034, this country should be making a massive play in the World Cup.
So when we look at the talent pool here, and I think for a lot of people, folks are not aware of this, but the talent pool in the US is immense, right? When you look at like the bit of a wider topic here, but when you look at the NFL, there's 32 teams and there's 55 players in the team. So the chance of becoming a professional is very limited. You look at the NBA, that's even smaller. So for any athlete who's a very good athlete, and over here there's very good in the schooling system. Like back home, PE is not kind of like taken that serious, but in the
Yeah.
US, sports is very serious. And if you're good enough and you're a good enough athlete at school, you will get picked up, and there's scholarships and all that type of stuff. So if they're looking at a professional career, the path to being a pro footballer is far easier, I would say, than being a pro NFL player or pro NBA player. And I think once that penny drops, that you have more likelihood to find a career here, that's going to see a bit of a different wave in that aspect. The other aspect I was getting to about the MLS being kind of almost holding it back is if you look at the Premier League, each club, there's kind of got rules and regulations, but each club can go and sign players based upon like country regulations. So, for example, for the kid from Germany, Hertha, Icon, his name, the Liverpool's after Kennedy, Acorn,
Aichon.
Aichon. So Aichon, it's because of a legality reason he cannot join the Premier League until he's 18, right? And I believe similarly in Brazil, players can't leave until a certain age. That's a country regulation for labor and stuff like that. But in the US, the MLS, it decides which teams can sign players, and they have to go through kind of like it's kind of like with US sports as a commission, and then they'll put the applications in, and they can deny it. So there's kind of like how they would spread the players out. And I think because of that structure, it really hinders clubs from signing young talents and bringing them to academy. So academy football, I don't even think exists here. So that is a detriment there as well. Because for folks that are in the US, pro sports really starts after college, so after university in the UK. Whereas when we look at the Premier League and the other players are in the academies from 7, 8, and they kind of can grow up and then they can kind of move laterally sideways. I think that is a big blocker as well in terms of path to professionalism. However, going back to the athletic side, if you look at players that are playing in the NFL or in the NBA, there's a lot of freak athletes, right? Obviously, the biggest freak is from France right now, Victor Wembanyama. But if you look at the majority of players, they would match the physicality type game that we're heading to, being, between the 5'11" to 6'2" range. There's a whole bunch of players that fit that profile, fast, athletic. The issue obviously will be feet, right? Because when you play with your feet and you need to be good at dribbling and ball control. But I think if that's picked up at a young age, definitely in 10 years, you would see a different Team USA, and it's going to be definitely up there. Coming back to Pochettino and the work that he has, do you think that he's had enough time to kind of work on gelling the team together and the chemistry?
This is where I feel sorry for international managers. They don't never get enough time. It's very hard to assemble a team and a structure and a system where you only get the players for like 10 days before the tournament starts. Yes, he's been in this job for, I believe, a year now, taking over Greg Berhalter. It all depends on the players, Rio. It depends on how quickly these players adapt to the system. Pochettino's a manager that needs time. He always needs time. You look at all the clubs that he's done work, and he needs time. He needed time at Chelsea, but they didn't want to give him the time. He was always going to get ugly at Chelsea before he got better, but they didn't want to take the chance. They sacked him, and they've been free fall. I think they'll get it right now with Alonso, but they've been a club in free fall for the last 2-3 years. But Friday will be a good indicator, and it will tell us a lot whether Pochettino's had enough time. I'm expecting them to beat Paraguay on Friday. I think it's going to be a great game. No, they're playing Paraguay.
That's the Brazil-Morocco.
Brazil-Morocco on Saturday. So I'm expecting the USA to put on a good showing on Friday, and they'll be up for it. SoFi Stadium, the first game of the tournament for the US, Friday night under the lights. I expect big things, and that'll set the tone. If they have if they have a good showing, they win 2-0 or 3-1 against Paraguay. You start creating momentum, and we've seen it in past tournaments. Anything with momentum, I'm not saying they'll go all the way, but they can certainly have a good tournament.
And I think that's a big part, as you mentioned, like the host nation with football being the fourth or fifth sport here. If they win on Friday, and all of a sudden the media starts talking about Team USA has a chance to win, and the country gets behind them as like with the good chance of winning, then I think anything changes, because I think that fan energy plays a big part in terms of the overall energy of the team, and also for the competitors, right? The opponents, if they are going to the game and they kind of see the fan energy, that kind of resonates. One thing I did want to touch on is, how do you feel like the World Cup, obviously this year being at the end of the domestic season, because 2022, I felt like being in the middle of the season, all the players were kind of like prime and still hungry. With it being after a long, grueling season, do you feel that the players are going to be, when they're going to see the best of the best? They're going to see a lot of drained legs and washed
Yeah,
energy.
yeah. This is the issue with having tournaments in the summer is by the end of it, by the start of the tournament, you know, for the first 1 or 2 games, you're up for it, but you can just tell once it gets to the knockout stages, these players are labored, they're lagging, they're tired, and you know, they're going to be taking breaks during the game because of the heat. So that's the only skepticism I have. I thought the Qatar World Cup has probably been the best World Cup that I've ever witnessed. That final, I mean, that's not going to be topped for a long, long time. You know, I can bet my bottom dollar that even at the World Cup here in the US, I can't. The final, I think it's in New Jersey, Rutherford. I can't
Yeah.
see it being better than the one in Qatar. But I'm hoping for a lot of goals. There'll be plenty of surprises, like any World
Oh,
Cup. There will be plenty of surprises. There'll be nations that we didn't expect to do well, but because of the weather, that could be a game changer for some. But I think when it comes to the nitty gritty stage, the final four, I think we will see the same kind of teams: England, Brazil, Spain, France. You know, Germany. I'm looking forward to see what Nagelsmann does with Germany because he's got a young team, and you know we need certain players having a good tournament. Our very own Florian Wirtz needs to have a very good tournament. But I'm excited about Germany. But yeah, around that 4 or 5 team, and Portugal as well. I've actually tipped Portugal to win it.
yeah.
But let's see what happens.
You beat me to the punch there. Actually, I also I said yesterday I see Portugal as a dark horse
Yeah.
because a lot of people are going to say Ronaldo, but when you take a step back of that, you look at their midfield: Vitinha, João Neves, uh, um, Mendes on the left back. You got Bruno
Yeah, like
Fernandes.
they got Mateus Fernandez. You know, he's had a good tournament, a good. You know,
That's squad depth. He's
yeah,
squad depth. Yeah.
they've got the depth for sure. Renato Vega. You know, they've got good defenders. Diaz. They've got exciting players. Yeah,
Uh,
I've tipped Portugal. It all depends on Martinez whether he trusts Ronaldo in the big games.
I think
Whether
Ronaldo is
yeah.
definitely an X factor in terms of I think right now he's almost like having an icon in the locker room, right?
Mhm.
He's more kind of like that, galvanizing or manage or like these are the kids' heroes, right? They grew up
Yeah.
watching him play, and now he's in the locker room, and they've for some of it maybe try to show off to him, like, hey, look what I can do, right? So I think it's a big part of Ronaldo's aura, I guess, in the same way Messi is that for Argentina, right? So I definitely see Portugal as being a big favorite. The other side, obviously, there's a controversy. I'm not sure if you heard too much about it, about the grass on the stadiums, especially the NFL stadiums, and how they were concrete and the amount of cushioning that's going to be on the grass. I have my own concerns in terms of are we going to see more injuries because of the grass? What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, and it doesn't help when they wear these light material boots. I think the boots have got a massive play in this. The lighter the feet, the players seem to want these days the material of the boot to feel very light. Whereas back in the day when you had heavy boots, you weren't prone to these metatarsal injuries, these ankle injuries, and the shin pads as well. They don't even wear shin pads anymore. The shin pads is probably the size of this iPad case. You know, you look at someone like Jack Grealish, he'll pull out a shin pad and it's the size of a AirPod case. So the game has evolved so much, and yeah, there's nothing like playing on real grass, not synthetic grass. There's nothing like playing on real grass. I think one of the teams they were showing the bounce of the ball, and it literally they tried to bounce the ball on
Yeah,
the
it's a
pitch,
brick.
and it didn't do anything.
Yeah,
So
because I think the requirement is they're all playing real grass, but it's like the base is concrete, and then they put like a layer of soil, topsoil, and then a grass, and but it's not thick enough. Being a bit self-service from a Liverpool perspective, I'm kind of glad a lot of the players are not going, right? Like Soboslai, Kirkes, but I'm concerned for players like Wirtz and Isak going because of the soil, right? Because They've not had the most robust season last season, and I'm a bit concerned in terms of the makeup of the pitch, and hopefully, injuries are averted. But I am concerned about the pitch, and I think that's going to impact the game because remember in 2010 the ball, with the Jabulani ball, was kind of seen as impacting the goalkeeping stuff. I think this pitch, especially if the bounces are off, we're probably going to see a lot of keeper mistakes because they're projecting a bounce and then it kind of bounces in. But I would say overall, this is probably one of the first World Cups where I'm looking at it almost like as a complete neutral, where every team has a chance of, well, not every team, but there's a lot of teams that have a chance. Like the final 16, once we see that final 16 teams, it could be any of those teams can make it because there's so many different factors, as we mentioned. Like, there's not a clear-cut favorite. We have our own choices, but overall, it's going to be an exciting World Cup. It's going to be something that I think that whilst it may not, from a quality standpoint, may not be the same as 2022, but I feel overall we're going to be seeing exciting games, unexpected games. And I think one of the biggest things, I know a lot of people are talking about feedback of 48 teams is too much. I think it gives the smaller nations a window to showcase their football. And also, because of those smaller teams, they're going to approach you with no fear. Like, they're not going to turn up and be like, oh, we're going to be playing this team, so we're going to be scared. They're going to go all out for it. And so I expect we're going to see a lot of underdogs getting results in this World Cup.
Yeah, I think there'll be a few upsets along the way for sure. That's every World Cup. I'm not a big fan of having too many teams. I thought this 48 team is, and the reason being is I totally understand and I totally respect that these smaller nations have been given a chance to perform at the biggest stage of them all, which is the World Cup. But in my opinion, you want the very best. You want group of deaths. You want groups to be tight. You want groups to be, of 2-3 quality teams. I've seen some of the groups, and I know the group stages, they're not going to be fun. There's probably 1 or 2 games. I think the first 3-4 days, I'm looking forward to probably 2 games out of 8. Whereas previous World Cups, you're looking forward to a lot more games. France 98, Scotland, Brazil, first game. That set the tone. It was a great game. Scotland gave it their all. I don't want to see, like, no disrespect to these nations, but like Curacao playing against Iran, or playing against Spain, or Cape Verde playing, they don't interest me. And I say that, I'm trying to say that in a respectful way, but it's going to come off rude. But I want to see 3-4 groups where there's tough teams. I want to see a Spain and France in the same group. I want to see France fighting for, not qualifying, or it goes to the last game. We're going to see a lot of top teams comfortably going into the knockout stage. And I think the knockout stage is the last 16. I think that's where, for me, in my opinion, my tournament starts for me.
I mean, on the flip side of that, if we look at, Italy versus Bosnia, everyone would have said Italy's going through.
Yeah.
No.
Italy's. So I was one of those that didn't fancy them against Bosnia because the Italian League Federation, they're a few years away. This was the 3rd World Cup in a row that they've missed.
Yeah.
And when you look at some of the players that have graced this national team, it's a tragedy. I'd like to say that it's a bit of a tragedy that a nation like Italy, who's won the World Cup, I think 2 or 3 times, they're nowhere to be seen. So teams who have gone to the World Cup and have qualified, they've qualified there on merit. So I don't mind if Italy have not gone through, or Hungary haven't qualified, but the whole scope of teams that have qualified, I mean, I'm not interested in a New Zealand, Austria, or a Jordan versus Algeria. Algeria, yes, I don't mind watching them. They're an exciting team, but Jordan, I didn't know. Unless they bring a surprise, I'll root for them. But there's a lot of teams that have qualified, and I totally understand where you're coming from. But for me, the tournament starts with the last 16 teams. And if Jordan are there, and Austria are there, and these Curacao in the last 16, then by God, they're there on merit.
Because I'll go back to the AFCON, and it's kind of like we heard about what some pundits say about there that it's not a big competition. And when you see like the games and stuff, it's like everyone's just going for it. So from a purely entertainment standpoint, I can see the value of that. From a quality standpoint, might not be the case. However, as you know, with the World Cup, there's obviously money to be made here, and that's why it's so big, because you get more eyeballs on the product and you have more people that's watching, and that's pretty much what it is, right? It is a case of we're just trying to make as much money out of this as possible, and hence why we have 48 teams in the World Cup. And that's why it's not, they didn't add more teams from Europe, they added from teams from other parts of the world. And that's kind of like a bigger subject in itself in terms of sports and money and all that type of stuff involved. But I do get where your point we're coming from for the World Cup, and I do foresee that there's going to be some games where hardly anyone's watching them, right? We're going to see probably the record lows for viewership, and we may get some of the games at record highs for viewership because of just, or at least the follow-up, right? Because there could be an absolute train wreck at this World Cup in terms of the performances and everyone's just watching for a laugh. But overall, as I said, I've been saying, I'm really excited for the World Cup as a whole. And for me, a bit of history in the World Cup. My first World Cup being aware of was Mexico '86.
Wow.
And then 1990, that was the first one where I was kind of really knew what was going on, because '86 I was still really young. And in '94 was another one where, again, was a big World Cup. Now, one of the two things about Mexico '86 and '94 World Cup, for me, the lighting of the games were always, if you looked at a highlight and you took one picture and someone took a picture and you're like, that was either Mexico or US, because of the lighting and the sun in the sky. And we're going to see that this World Cup, because we're going to see that for the games in Mexico at the Azteca Stadium. We're going to see that for the games in the US. And they, for me, are kind of like a vintage World Cup picture is of when you see these games, any screenshot or anything like that from back in the day. And we're going to see that again. So I'm excited for that, for World Cup '94, for that aspect. And overall, I'm excited that we're going to get a festival of football. We all know that in the US, it's going to have a lot of pageantry. We got the Coldplay during the World Cup final, kind of like the Super Bowl halftime show. But it's hopefully going to be exciting, hopefully going to be energetic. And already, I'm kind of already looking forward to the next Premier League season, because obviously with the coaching changes. But interestingly enough, Liverpool's preseason starts week after in the US, literally a few days after the World Cup final. So it just goes to show, and when we talk about being tired and fatigued, for some players, they need that break, and I don't even know when it's going to come. So it's definitely a tough time.
Yeah, and I believe some of the players, like if Holland's Virgil van Dijk, Ryan Gravenberch, Gakpo, if they go further down the line in the tournament, I think they won't join the USA preseason straight away. I think they'll join maybe 10 days after. I think they will get some time away. But yeah, I'm surprised that your first memory was '86. My first memory was '94, Germany, Bolivia. I still remember it as, anything, watching it at home. First World Cup, I believe Germany had won that 1-0. I think Klinsmann had scored actually in that 1-0 against Bolivia. That was my first sort of World Cup, '94. Obviously the final with Roberto Baggio missing. There were some great games. Brazil, Holland in that World Cup. Obviously Ray Houghton against Italy, Nigeria. This is what I will love about the World Cup. This is what I will say. All these nations are bringing flavor to this World Cup.
Yeah.
From nations like Curacao, Cape Verde, from the French, from the Dutch, from the English, of them singing It's Coming Home, the US, the Mexicans. Everyone is going to bring different flair from different parts of the world. That's what unites this World Cup. And, I'm all supportive of it. And that's what I will love about this World Cup is nations, and in previous World Cups, nations coming together and enjoying a competitive game of football. And Mexico have the chance on Thursday to really set that tone. If they can play some free-flowing football and we see goals in that first game, then you'll have people looking forward to they've got to set the tone.
Actually, when you say that, it's like 1990, Reggie Miller, right, is known for. And, they beat Argentina, right, 1-0, right? So the World Cup winners. So, and back then, no one was thinking Cameroon, they were giving them a shot, right? And then in '94, there was, who was?
Romania.
Yeah, Georgia Hadji and Stoichkov, right? Coming out of nowhere.
Bulgaria were great. They were in the semis, I believe, Bulgaria,
So there's always every World Cup. There's a kind of a glamour story or a what they call it, Cinderella story. So I think we may see that. I don't think it's gonna be Curacao, but it could be another team. But yeah, interestingly, as you mentioned, that with Mexico and all the other teams. Oh, sorry, what I did want to get to that is the fact that the Premier League season starts pretty much 1 month after the World Cup. I don't know how any teams are going to do any give time players off, because if whoever wins the World Cup, let's just say they give them 2 weeks off, and they need to come back for preseason. So at the beginning of August, so let's just say they get 3 weeks off, they get 1 week preseason time. So it's the football calendar is this year is actually ridiculous, if I'll be honest, because if you're, for example, Declan Rice, and let's say England wins the World Cup, right? He gets 1 week off in 52 weeks. That's just insane.
Yeah, it's disruption, and when they overplaying, they'll have injuries. I remember Pedri in the 2018 World Cup. It must have been the 2018 World Cup or 2022. He was playing for Spain the World Cup. He had played for the under-21s previously in the World Cup in March, goes to the World Cup, and then he's playing in the Olympics as well. And then he suffers an ACL, poor guy, and it took him a year to get back into that Barcelona team. So there is conditioning, there's being overplayed, overworked. And you hope these players and these clubs, if it is Declan Rice and he's leading the charge for England and they win the World Cup, that Arteta, Arsenal, they give him the opportunity to rest.
Yeah.
And they've got and Arsenal have got enough depth to give him the first 2 weeks off in the season.
What's interesting is because Hakimi is also similar to Pedri, right? He played AFCON, I think World Cup, Olympics, and I think he had a stretch of 2.5 years. But then when you look at PSG, is the domestic league, they don't play, right? So they have that time off. So while some players can have that, and Pedri didn't have that luxury at Barcelona, it's a tougher league. So I do have concerns about injuries, but I don't know. Let's just focus on positives and focus for a good World Cup. And thank you for joining. And
of course,
and hope everyone enjoys this episode and are informed and educated on the outlook for the World Cup. So thanks, Avi, and yeah, we'll see you soon.